Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 41. Today's episode we look at virtual assistants and we review the book Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Hey, it's Adam Franklin and welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. You'll be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments where we show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. We confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. Now, the show is brought to you by our book, which is also called Web Marketing That Works, and it's brought to you specifically by the 33 free marketing templates that can go with it. So if you would like to get your hands on those templates, please head to bluewiremedia.com.au/book, enter your name and email, and they are all yours. All right, so the topic for today's show is outsourcing and using VAs, which are virtual assistants, to really help your marketing come together. Now, Tobes and I have been on this outsourcing / VA journey for quite a few years now, but there's always room for improvement. And I have just finished reading Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. And this is a book all about how to get VAs into your team and to actually train them up and teach them the types of roles that they can be doing to help make your life as a marketing person or maybe a business owner a lot easier. And I guess it's worth mentioning the fact that since day one of our business, Tobes and I have always aspired to have financial freedom, but more importantly, geographic freedom, in that we're not tied to a specific city or part of the world, and we've got the freedom to travel around and do the things that we want to be doing, but also run the business and do the things that we love within the business. And so, recording this episode from Bali as part of another lifestyle experiment to see how that all goes. And so far, it's been smooth. The only minor thing, I guess, has been the Wi-Fi connection. So you may actually be listening to this podcast by the time I make it back to Australia, because that's where I'll be uploading it to. So I think next time I'd probably just pre-record a few podcast episodes so I'm not stranded having to wait to get to more powerful Wi-Fi. Okay, so that's a bit of a background on the reason why partly that I was reading the book, and that it just seemed a very appropriate book to be reading on the flight over to Bali and to be finishing off whilst I've been over here. As I said earlier, Tobes and I have been on this virtual assistant journey for quite a few years now, and it started when one of our mentors, Mike O'Hagan, the owner and founder of Mini Movers, who we've had on the show before, he put us onto odesk.com, and it really opened our eyes to the world of global talent. And the examples back then when we first saw it were, assistants that were helping him do market research and web development and all these different tasks, all for a much cheaper rate than you might get in Australia or in the Western world, but at a rate that the person doing it's much higher than what they'd be getting in their local economy too. So it really did seem like a win-win situation. So we set about learning how to do it, and I guess we've had mixed results. The real take-home for me with our own experience has been that it's just as hard to find a good VA as it is to find a good employee or a good in-person talent. There's a lot that you learn as you go in terms of how to actually scope out jobs and to actually recruit the right people. But as you grow your team and you find really good people, it's well worth hanging on to them. And it has certainly made our marketing a whole lot easier having a team of outsourced people. And outsourced isn't really the right word. Outsourced always has connotations of being offshore and sometimes cheap, sometimes nasty. I'm just talking about virtual assistants who don't actually share the same office space as you. They don't actually share the same geographical location as you, but you work and you collaborate as a team on various projects. and you've typically got the same person in that role as an ongoing relationship with that person. And to clarify some of the areas where we have virtual assistants is design and development and research and video editing. And there's going to be a whole lot more, having read Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. So let me, start by sharing the first take home from the book. I really liked on page 23, he's got this table of things that a table of things that you can be outsourcing. So the first column includes things that you don't like doing. So you create a list of things you don't like doing, and some of the examples might be checking email, managing social media, handling basic inquiries, and researching travel options. So typically these are things that you do yourself, but you don't particularly enjoy. In the second column, there's things that you can't do, which makes perfect sense to get some help to do it. These include things like developing a website, editing a podcast, designing logos or infographics, and bookkeeping and accounting. So that makes sense. Things that you can't do, you really need to outsource and get professional help where you can. And then list 3 is things that you shouldn't be doing. And I guess as a marketing person or a business owner, these can include updating your Facebook page, handling tier 1 support, transcribing online video, or managing your company blog. And I guess maybe the company blog one might be an exception for a content marketing person. But that said, for most business owners, managing the blog is a different thing to actually writing the blog post. It's editing and formatting and all of those other things, which is probably best assigned to somebody else, and so that you can focus on actually creating the content for the blog. So for me, that provided a really nice framework for areas that we can actually look to outsource and find people to fill roles to help look after those areas. And to make it even easier for us, Chris in the book has actually outlined the 7 key areas where we can actually look to find virtual assistants. And I'll go into each of them in more detail, but just to give you the overview, the first position is a general virtual assistant, or a GVA. The second one is a web developer. Third is a graphic designer. Fourth is an SEO specialist or an internet marketing specialist. Next one is a content writer, then a video editor, and I guess in that you could also include podcast editing, and then finally an app developer. Now the first of those 7 roles, the general virtual assistant, that was the one that kind of, not surprised, I guess it did surprise me the most, but it was the one I hadn't thought of yet. Like I certainly had thought about some of those specific roles that you get help with, but a GVA kind of serves to manage all of those people and to do other types of general administrative work as well. For example, they might be monitoring your email, they might be making travel recommendations or bookings for you. A GVA might be doing small purchases. You might have given them a prepaid credit card so that they can do these things for you. And ideally they're checking in with the other members of your virtual team as that virtual team grows. Now, the next couple of roles, being a web developer and a graphic designer, are both areas that Tobes and I are fortunate enough to have had quite a bit of experience with in terms of hiring and retaining and working with web developers and graphic designers. So we're very fortunate to have a large pool of talent there that we can draw on and have continued to draw on over the years. These days, if you're a regular listener to the show, you'll know that a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, we discontinued doing web design stuff for clients, and now we simply advise on it and we point people in the right direction. And we always do recommend having a web development partner, whether it's a freelancer or a company, but some way that you can get virtual help with this. We have a handful of web developers that we use for bigger projects, but we also use WP Curve, which is a company run by a friend of ours, Dan Norris, who has also been on the podcast. But it's really good because they do WordPress updates and edits, and anything that is considered under a half-hour job, they will do for a monthly fee. And I've just found that service tremendous lately because you don't need to bug your web developers who you might use for more serious projects, but it's all the small little updates that you just want done in a timely manner that this service really is good for. But anyway, so Chris in the book, he sort of says some of the typical duties of a web designer include to install and customize a blog, install a shopping cart and buy now buttons, create an e-commerce site, create a membership site, maintain backups and make sure software and plugins are all up to date, and how he says it, work with PHP and other scary programming languages. Now, I'm a non-techie and Toby's a non-techie, and chances are you as the listener are a non-techie. So if you are, that's fine. It's good because there's plenty of help that you can get on the web development front. I do certainly recommend using WordPress as your website content management system and blogging platform, purely for the reason that it is just so well supported, it's robust, it's got tons and tons of plugins, and you can move it around. So say, for example, you fall out with one web developer, there's so many other developers that work in WordPress that you'll never be stranded, you'll never be tied to one person, and there's such a huge community of developers and support that it's just a very, very safe option. I personally think if your web developers trying to build you custom stuff, custom websites, proprietary type websites, then that's where things can go wrong. If the relationship turns sour, if the business takes a different path, and if the business takes a different path, so really stick with WordPress and you will be fine. Okay, so the third role is that of a graphic designer. And again, we've had a lot of work with graphic designers over the years and all have been very, very good. Some of the typical duties that Chris Ducker recommends in the book are things like to create logos and business cards, to make product images, make 3D images for videos, to customize web icons and buttons, and to design original websites and create new concepts. We also use graphic designers for things like designing ebooks, designing infographics, designing event material. So if any of those things are things that your business needs, then an outsourced graphic designer will work really well. And I guess it's probably worth saying that the web developer and the graphic designer, they're very important roles, and I've certainly found more success using domestic people rather than offshore people, partly because I like to have worked with people face-to-face for a little while, even if face-to-face means Skype. I know you can do that offshore as well, but I've certainly found that people that I've worked on a few projects with very closely have proven to be the best designers and developers to work with on an ongoing basis. So the fourth role that Chris Ducker suggests outsourcing or finding a virtual assistant for is the role of a search engine optimization specialist or a web marketing specialist. And as you'll know, the podcast is called Web Marketing That Works. So Tobes and I are both very experienced, I guess, with web marketing, but there's so many facets that make up web marketing, and search engine optimization is it can be a very technical area. For the most part, SEO is quite a simple concept in that Google looks for content and authority and ranks you accordingly. But that said, behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of work that you can and should be doing that's very technical and very time-consuming. Things like research, optimizing page titles, meta descriptions, interlinking content throughout your website, performing off-site SEO techniques like link building. Although that said, there's some basic link building and content promotion that can be outsourced. However, a lot of the most effective types of link building should really be looked at as relationship building, and you as the business owner or the marketer needs to be the person leveraging those relationships that you have to try and get those link opportunities from the more powerful, more recognized blogs and websites out there. However, there are some lower level SEO link building techniques that an outsourced person could do. Things like making recommendations for existing pages on your website as to how you might optimize them better, what keywords you might add on to those pages to actually rank for another keyword phrase and therefore drive more traffic to your website. And so really that SEO role is a very technical one, and it's certainly worth looking to get some help there. Now, the fifth role that is brought up in Virtual Freedom, the book by Chris Ducker, is getting a content writer. And this is very important because on one hand, you need to be writing your own content and sharing your thoughts and ideas, or you need to be sharing your ideas, I guess. Part of the way to make that easier is to have a content writer help you. So, for example, they might interview you and take your thoughts and document that, and then hand that back to you to review, to make sure that the ideas are all as you wanted them to be portrayed, and you can put your flavor on that piece of content. But you might also look at content writers. I guess you look at that person that I've just described as a ghost writer, and that they're taking your ideas and writing them for you. The other aspect of a content writer is to actually write articles for your blog themselves. And I guess that's kind of like the role of an editor. So they would be writing their own content for the blog and also ideally managing guest blog post contributions from other writers. So that is a very important role because content is very often the stumbling block with people's content marketing efforts. It all sounds good in theory to do content marketing, but when push comes to shove and you've actually got to produce content that's good quality on a regular basis, then that is when often in our 9.5 years experience, we've seen projects grind to a halt because the content part really is quite difficult and quite time consuming. So hiring a content writer is the fifth role suggested in this book. Now the sixth is a video editor, and I'm just going to include in that as a podcast editor as well. Now video editing is again quite a technical skill. It doesn't have to be difficult. I've personally made the choice to learn how to edit videos and podcasts. And now that I've got the process mapped out and I understand how to do it, I'm very comfortable outsourcing that role as well. Particularly over the years, we've had a video editor, multiple different video editors, and I've found frustration that sometimes you've got to wait for the video to come back in its entirety, only to then go back and say, oh no, I meant this here and I meant that there. I've certainly found having basic editing skills means I can film something and upload it and have it live much, much more quickly. If I'm trying to develop something of a more professional is not the right word, but of a more polished nature, then having a video editor on standby to help is really effective. And again, with podcasting, I've certainly learnt the skills of podcast editing myself. I've been doing this episode, and Toby and I have done all the previous episodes. And again, now that we've got the process mapped out and we understand how to do it and we're comfortable doing it, I do realise that it does take up a reasonable amount of time. And even though I've enjoyed doing it up to this point, this is a particular area that I'll be looking to find a virtual assistant for, to actually top and tail the podcasts and to to do the post-production stuff with Auphonic and to convert it into an MP3 file and to upload it to Libsyn, which is our podcast host. All that stuff takes a fair bit of time. Even though it's not difficult, it's time-consuming. So again, that's a perfect example of an area of our business that we've identified, thanks to the book, that we probably should be outsourcing as well, so that we can focus more time on producing these podcasts and training videos and less time doing the grind work of editing them. And finally, the seventh example and final example of a role that you could be finding a virtual assistant for is an app developer. And to be fair, that's not something that Tobes and I have had experience with, even though we get a lot of requests for building apps. It's not something that we've done. So I guess I can't really comment from first-hand experience there. I don't have any intentions in the short term of building any apps. I could be wrong there, or maybe I should. But anyway, if you want an app, then you can certainly hire a virtual assistant to help you out there. So that's the 7 major roles that Chris outlines. There are a number of other things like transcription services that he recommends getting a VA for. And you can, definitely. I've certainly found the program speechpad.com to be very, very effective on that front. Basically, you upload a video or an audio file, or you submit the link to YouTube, and SpeechPad will transcribe that for you. I think it's done via a robot and then has a human element go over it as well. But anyway, I've used it plenty of times for interview transcriptions, and the accuracy is well over 99.9%. It does sometimes, however, require a read-through just to make a few edits, because a transcription service will actually transcribe the words verbatim, whereas when you actually take a transcription to turn it into something that you can use for, say, a blog post or an ebook, you really want to maybe take out some of the ums and ahs if there are some, and also rewording it slightly to make a couple of edits to make it a bit smoother. And finally, the other area that we've used a VA for has been things like business card transcriptions as well. I did used to use an online product for that, but I found the accuracy not as good as I was hoping, and the speed not quite as good as I was hoping. But with a virtual assistant, I found that the turnaround can be well under 24 hours. And people say, if you go to an event, you meet a whole bunch of people, or when I do my public speaking, I collect business cards for people that are interested in opting into my newsletter. I like to just photograph all of them on my iPhone and then Dropbox them over to our virtual assistant, who will then transcribe them all into a spreadsheet and send that back to me, so that I can just upload them into our system and send everybody out the appropriate emails that I promised them. So in a nutshell, they are the key take-home messages that I got from Chris Ducker's book. I've obviously only just touched the tip of the iceberg. That those 7 roles in that earlier framework of that table of the things that you don't like doing, things that you can't do, and then things that you shouldn't do, really provides the framework for, I guess, the understanding of how VAs can help you with your business and with your marketing. And in the rest of the book, Chris actually outlines case studies and tools and processes that you can follow to actually make all of this stuff happen. And so far, in mine and Toby's journey, it's been working really well. As I said, there's more that we need to implement, and thanks to Chris's book, we will. But I highly recommend giving it a go, because having virtual assistants really does help free up your time to be able to allow you to either do what you want or be focusing on the areas of the business that you particularly enjoy as well. So that brings episode 41 to a close. The intent of the show is to give you actionable advice, and your feedback and questions are always welcome. So please let us know via email or Twitter. My email is adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au, or tweet me at Franklin_Adam. The show is brought to you by our book called Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the 33 free marketing templates that go with it. So to get your hands on those, head over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. And finally, if you enjoyed the show, thanks for listening in to the end, and would also love it if you could take the time to leave us an honest review on iTunes. We will give a shout out to all the people that leave us a 5-star review. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking with you on the next episode. Bye.